So, you want to play a Soulsborne game? I hear you asking, which FromSoftware game should I start with? Or perhaps you've just completed Elden Ring and now you're looking for other FromSoftware games to play. Maybe you've heard someone say that Soulsborne games are for pro gamers only and casuals won't be able to beat them. Well, I'm here to tell you that that previous sentence could not be further from the truth. Yes, these games will challenge you, yes, these games will test you, but they are fair.
Surprise!
Well, fair most of the time. With enough patience and determination, you'll be able to overcome the challenges and feel that sweet sense of victory. Because these games don't hold your hand in any way, there are no better games to experience that sense of reward and triumph. You'll have to constantly learn and adapt to overcome the difficulties that are set before you. In this video, I'm going to share a bit of information about each of the Soulsborne games, giving you some insight into each one and letting you know what to expect. By the end of this video, you'll be armed to the teeth with knowledge and you'll be ready to take on any challenge. We'll be covering Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, 2 and 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro and Elden Ring. We will be showing some footage of boss fights, as boss fights are one of the biggest selling points of these games, so I'll just drop a very slight spoiler warning here. Let's get into it. Demon Souls is set in Boletaria, a kingdom consumed by an evil being called the Old One. You're brought to Boletaria to kill its fallen king Allant and to pacify the Old One. You have to navigate and overcome 5 very different worlds that you access from a central hub called the Nexus. Demon Souls is the starting point of the Soulsborne formula, so this game has a heavy emphasis on challenging combat and mechanics that surround player death and respawning. This player death and respawning mechanic will be used in all the other games mentioned in this video apart from Sekiro, so let's go over that mechanic now. When you die, you'll drop your souls in the spot where you died. You'll then respawn at a checkpoint and you'll get one chance to retrieve your dropped souls. If you die again on the way back to recollect your souls, then you will permanently lose them. The catch is that enemies will respawn at the same time that you respawn. This game mechanic most of the time means that you double up your souls, because if you die and then work your way back to recollecting your souls again, whilst killing enemies along the way, you have essentially doubled up your souls. Obviously, if you die whilst on the way to collect them again, then that's a different story.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because
souls are used as experience points and also currency, so it's very useful if you can collect them back again. Make sure to spend your souls to improve your stats and gear. Another mechanic in Demon Souls is if you die, you will change from human form into soul form, and in soul form you'll only have 50% of your maximum HP, although you can get a ring that puts it back up to 75% of your maximum HP whilst you're wearing that ring. You can consume an item called a Stone of Ephemeral Eyes or defeat a boss to put yourself back into human form. The bosses on Demon Souls are not the most challenging in the Soulsborne series. They might trip you up a few times on your first playthrough, but after you learn what the fight is about, then you'll blast through them pretty quick. I'd say it's mostly the general enemies that will give you the most amount of trouble, especially if you die during a boss fight. You'll then need to do a run back to the boss arena whilst making your way past the hordes of enemies waiting to pounce on you and make your life a living hell. As you can imagine, that's not a scenario that you want to be in. On this basis, I'd highly recommend keeping your eyes peeled for level shortcuts that are carefully implemented into the level design that make your playthrough a lot smoother. Remember, challenging but fair. Dark Souls takes all that Demon Souls was and then cranks it up a level. It still has pretty much the same or similar mechanics, but this time there isn't a central hub that warps you over to different levels, but there is a central hub that very intricately ties a lot of locations together. This central hub is called the Firelink Shrine. Everything just ties together insanely well and you'll find yourself saying, oh, this place connects to this place many times. Later on in the game, you also get the ability to warp between bonfires. In Dark Souls, you play as the Chosen Undead. You'll be fighting against knights, dragons, phantoms, demons, and other monstrous creatures as you make your way to rekindle something called the First Flame. The quality and the intensity of the boss fights are vastly improved in Dark Souls in comparison to Demon Souls. This game has some of the most iconic boss fights of all time. There are so many tiny details packed into this game that will have you exploring and adventuring for for days. FromSoftware does an amazing job of giving you that sense of mystery and anticipation. Dark Souls also has illusionary walls, which are walls that vanish when you hit them or roll into them, which is just the cherry on top for that sense of wonder and exploration. The combat in Dark Souls is a bit slower paced in comparison to Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring and Bloodborne. Dark Souls also introduces a kindling mechanic where you can burn your humanity in a bonfire in exchange for more Estus flasks when you rest at that specific bonfire. And Estus flasks are your healing potions in this game. If you're a fan of Berserk, the anime or manga, and you haven't played Dark Souls, then you really should check out some Dark Souls. You can see a lot of Berserk's influence in this game. And if you're a fan of Dark Souls and you haven't checked out Berserk, then check out Berserk. Remember, challenging, but fair.
Oh, no! God! No! God, please, no!
You lose!
No!
Dark Souls 2 is huge. Including its DLC, I believe it has the most number of bosses in the Dark Souls trilogy. You will once again get access to a central hub called Majula, which is my personal favourite central hub in the whole Soulsborne series. And from Majula, you can make your way in whichever direction you want, which will lead you to explore some weird and wonderful locations. In this game, you play as the Bearer of the Curse. The combat and movement is a bit more rigid and slower in this game. It doesn't quite have the same fluent feel that you'll get on Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring and Bloodborne. The pacing at the start of the game does feel a little bit slower in comparison to the other Soulsborne games. I think that's because there's loads of different areas that you can go and explore if you want to, but you don't really need to. And the base game bosses do feel a little bit lackluster. Sometimes they might feel like they're missing that extra special something. Most of the time you'll end up smashing through the boss fights on your first or second attempt, and the boss mechanics are not the most complex, so you'll figure them out quite quickly. And just for the record here, I'm not saying that Dark Souls 2 is a bad game. I actually really enjoy it. I just think that it doesn't have as much polish as the other games do. I would say it's the DLC where Dark Souls 2 really starts to shine. It has 3 DLCs: Crown of the Sunken King, Crown of the Old Iron King, and Crown of the Ivory King. And these DLCs just feel a lot more polished and well done, and they really crank up the boss fights. Dark Souls 2 has a hollowing mechanic. Basically, the more you die, the less health you have. Your health bar will keep decreasing each time you die, until it gets down to 50% of its maximum. You can use an item called a human effigy, which will take it back up to 100% again. You get a good amount of human effigies on the Scholar of the First Sin version of Dark Souls 2, so you should be fine. The Scholar of the First Sin version is a slightly revamped and repackaged version of Dark Souls 2, kind of like Dark Souls 2 version 1.2. And the Scholar of the First Sin version has all of the DLCs included. Bloodborne builds upon all the games that have come before it. The combat and the movement is a lot smoother and more fluent than Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. You play as a hunter of beasts that will adventure through the decrepit, gothic, Victorian era inspired city called Yharnam, whose inhabitants are infected with a blood disease. Attempting to find the source of the plague, you will unravel the city's mysteries while fighting beasts and cosmic beings. Bloodborne was inspired by the books and writing of authors H.P. Lovecraft and Bram Stoker, so you can expect some weird and wonderful enemy designs, themes and locations. And there really is some crazy enemy designs. Imagine you walk down a dark alley in the middle of the night and then turn a corner to see this. Yeah, that's Bloodborne. This game has more of a cosmic horror type vibe intertwined into it in comparison to Dark Souls and Demon Souls, but it does still have that dark gothic feel to it. You'll once again get access to a central hub called the Hunter's Dream, and from here you can travel to different locations. Whilst in the Hunter's Dream, you can access the Hunter's Workshop where you can level up and improve your hunter's tools. And most of the weapons in the game have a cool transformation, so you can kind of attack in 2 slightly different ways. One thing that I would mention is your healing potions in this game, they're called blood vials, do not auto respawn upon resting or dying. You have to go and buy more blood vials from the store in the central hub. At first this caught me off guard and I didn't enjoy it at all, as when I ran out of healing vials I then had to go out and hunt beasts for more blood echoes, which are the currency in this game, to then buy more blood vials with. And at first it kind of felt a little bit weird and grindy. However, After I spent more time in the game, I realized that that mechanic was implemented on purpose to force your hunter to go out and hunt more beasts, thus getting more blood echoes and continuing the theme of hunting beasts around the streets of Yharnam, which is essentially the entire idea of the game. After I learnt that and found out what the whole game was about, it kind of made me fall more in love with the process of going out and hunting beasts for blood echoes a lot more. There's also a really cool chalice dungeon system in Bloodborne, which is where I think they kind of stuck all of their cut content to give it a little bit of life. You don't have to do the chalice dungeons to complete the game, but I would recommend checking them out because they're really fun. If you're a fan of Call of Cthulhu or anything to do with eldritch horrors, then you should definitely check out some Bloodborne. There's also a health rallying mechanic, so when you take damage, you actually get a few seconds to attack your enemy to regain that lost health. You'll see a little indicator on your health bar to see how much health you can regain, and because of this mechanic, it tends to encourage more of an aggressive play style. Dark Souls 3 is a very well-rounded game. It takes all that has come before it and just smooths the edges insanely well. Again, similar to Bloodborne, the combat and movement is way smoother than Demon's Souls, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. I'd say that Dark Souls 3 is probably the closest overall feel to Elden Ring than any of the other Soulsborne games. So if you've played Elden Ring and you're looking for something very similar, then I'd say Dark Souls 3 is your safest bet. You play as the Ashen One, who is the final hope of rekindling the first flame and continuing the Age of Fire. This game has a lot of stuff mentioned in the previous games, such as epic boss fights, amazing world design, and that dark gothic fantasy vibe to it. It's just that all of that is done in a much smoother and well-refined way. So it kind of feels like a love letter to Demon's Souls, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. Not that that's a bad thing. This game has a kindling mechanic where you can use an item called an Ember on yourself. This will put your character into Enkindled mode. When in Enkindled mode, your character's appearance will change, your maximum HP is boosted by 30%, you're able to summon other players into your world using network play, you can be invaded by other players, and the Ember will restore your HP to full if it wasn't full already. If you're enjoying this video and finding it useful, I'd really appreciate it if you give this video a like and consider subscribing if you'd like to see more videos from me. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. In Sekiro, you play as Sekiro, the one-armed wolf shinobi. Sekiro is a completely different ballgame to all the games that we've mentioned before this. It takes everything you've learned from playing the Soulsborne games and then just throws it out the window. If you try to play Sekiro like Dark Souls, Demon's Souls or Bloodborne, then you'll get wrecked. The combat system is based around sword combat. You live or die by the edge of your blade. There's a posture bar and a perfect parry system. You can hold down block to negate the incoming damage, but as you continue to block attacks, your posture bar will fill up. If your posture bar is filled completely, your stance will be broken and you'll be open to taking massive damage. However, if you time your block perfectly as the attack is coming towards you, then you will parry the attack away, which actually deals damage to the enemy's posture bar. So the idea is to perfect parry the enemy's attacks to fill their posture bar, and once it's filled, you can instantly delete them using a Shinobi Death Blow attack. To add to this, the lower that your enemy's health bar is, the faster their posture bar will fill up, making it faster and easier to deliver that death blow to them. Sekiro is my personal favourite FromSoftware game at the time of this recording. That's because I'm a huge fanboy of feudal Japan, ninjas and samurai. I also think that Sekiro was originally going to be a Tenchu game, and I'm also a huge fanboy of Tenchu, but that's a story for another time. This game also has a stealth mechanic, so you can choose to take out enemies stealthily or run in there and fight them like a madman. You'll get access to shinobi tools such as a grappling hook, shurikens, a poisonous dagger, firecrackers and more, which you will need to use in certain situations to help you overcome the odds. If defeated, you do get the ability to revive once, and in later game you can revive more than once, but if you suffer a final death, then you will be forced to respawn at a checkpoint, and there is a chance that you will lose half of your in-game cash and half of your unspent experience points. There is no online co-op and there's no option to customize your build. You would kind of just use different shinobi tools if you wanted to approach a fight differently. It's just you, your shinobi tools, and your blade against the world. Some people love that and some people hate it. I personally love the way that Sekiro has been designed. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Oh, and on your first playthrough, you will likely die more than twice. On my first playthrough, I died many times.
Bye, have a great time.
It's worth mentioning that I do have boss guides, tutorials and walkthroughs for the vast majority of games mentioned in this video. Feel free to check them out on this channel. Elden Ring is essentially a culmination of all the previously mentioned games. It takes a little bit of everything from all of them and whacks it into a giant open world, a bit like an epic FromSoftware theme park. Basically, if you enjoy any aspect from the previously mentioned games, then you will likely enjoy Elden Ring. The game has a huge open world, so it's obviously a lot bigger than the other Soulsborne games, so expect to be putting in a lot more hours. There's a vast amount of locations to explore, bosses to fight, weapons and armor to collect, and generally just a lot more FromSoftware packed into this game. You play as a tarnished of no renown in your journey to repair the Elden Ring. Unlike the other games, you do get access to a mount called Torrent, which makes traversing the world a hell of a lot easier. Also, Torrent can double jump, which is really cool. You also get the ability to fast travel to any site of grace, which are the respawn points in this game, as long as you're not currently in combat or in some kind of dungeon or cave. If you're a fan of Game of Thrones or anything to do with George R.R. Martin, then I'd definitely check out some Elden Ring because he's had a part to play in building this world. As per usual, the boss fights are epic and intense, they will spank you a lot, and encourage you to surpass your limits. Which again still stays true to the FromSoftware philosophy of challenging but fair and rewarding games. Keep your head in the game, apply yourself to the fight, and overcome the odds. Remember, you only lose if you stop trying. You could really start your FromSoftware journey with any of these games as your first one. However, specifically for the Dark Souls trilogy, I would recommend playing 1, 2 and then 3 if possible, but don't worry too much if you can't play them in that order. Let me know in the comments if this video has helped you pick out your next FromSoftware adventure, and let us know which of the games you've played so far or are planning to play. And if you want to prepare yourself even further for your FromSoftware journey, then check out this video on the 10 most stress-inducing enemies in the whole Soulsborne series.